Broad Street Review podcast, Philly's online hub for arts, culture, and commentary, where art and ideas meet. I am your host, Darnell Radford. On today's podcast, I caught up with James Ijames, director of August Wilson's Gem of the Ocean at Arden Theatre Company. We talk about crafting a vision on an already layered piece, sharing that vision with an amazing design team, audience responses, and the through lines of Wilson's work. Here is part one of my interview with James Ijames.
There's this impulse for theater makers, whether you're, no matter where you are, to sort of be the sort of like engine of marketing for the art that you make.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm certainly someone who has done that. But there was something about this piece that felt sacred to me and felt personal. And I wanted to do right by it. So I didn't want to talk about it in a public forum. I also didn't want the thing that sort of happens when you post about something that you're working on. It's like, I'm sure it's going to be great. Everybody's really excited to see it. We're so proud of you. And it's like, well, great. But also, it's a hard play. Yeah. In terms of depth of character, in terms of sheer volume of spoken text of the play, it rivals some of Shakespeare's greatest works, in my opinion. I put Honesta right up there with Falstaff in terms of a character who is both enigmatic, complete, and deeply human. Because she's huge. The trick of this production is allowing her to take up as much space as possible, but when she speaks, make her feel like she's sitting right beside you. Yeah. And that's really hard to do. That's hard to do in that space. That's hard to do in a world where people are used to watching things when they want to watch them. Those are all really hard things to do. And are we successful? I don't know. My hope is that it does do that. It does that for me. Yeah. And I think most directors' approach to the work is you're the first audience that the piece has, so you're guiding what that experience is going to be. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to perform process in this way. I also have a really strong feelings about offering content to fill it up to Facebook, and not being compensated for it. Yeah. But that's a whole other podcast episode. That's the reason why I didn't really talk much about it. But at that moment of posting about it, it's the morning of opening night. I'm getting ready to go to the last rehearsal because we rehearsed and changed things right up until 3 hours before an audience showed up. And I left that day, or I entered that day feeling deeply proud and deeply honored to have gotten the chance to go on this journey. It's quick. It's 2 weeks in tech and previews. It's a quick process to build something that big. Yeah. So I did want to honor the day that people were going to, meet it in an official way. But yeah. Well,
it's not that I can even think about a moment where I've seen actors on stage just not giving their all, But you're sitting in there and you're just like, everybody's 100% invested, if not more. It's just like, I'm sitting there opening night, but it feels like it's been running for a month. and it's so comfortable. Like everything, just the movement and just, entrances and exits, they were just so clean and so simple, and you're just like, yeah, so this is life happening. We're sort of walking into life happening, even though there was a big curtain speech and there was this introduction and the lights go down and everything, but it's still like, we're here. And it's also the design of the set too, you were talking about Aunt Esther earlier, and her entrance, she towers over the house because she comes from upstairs, so she looks down. But yes, she's always, for the most part, soft-spoken, but everything she says needs to be said and has to be heard.
Yeah.
So you notice that right away, and I'm sitting there going, I wonder if the direction is Grandma. Go.
No.
Because I feel like a lot of grandmothers have, at least African American grandmothers have this wisdom that they know they're carrying. They can't just walk in a room and tell a child not to run through the house or anything. There's a reason. It's been years of me saying this, and there's a reason why this matters. So everything I say is going to matter. So I just felt like that. It was just like listening to Grandma give me wisdom about life. And you're just like, I got to pay attention to this. Every time she speaks, none of it is unnecessary.
Absolutely. And I remember a direction that I gave to Zahara was to not think about old, but to think about ancient, which are different things. And the pyramids in their heyday, when they're just freshly made, are these shiny sort of maybe even gaudy, gleaming things, polished. And then if you see them in Egypt now, they are still impressive, and they still hold power and majesty, even though they're thousands of years old at this point. I was in Paris this past summer. You walk into something like Notre Dame, which is also really, really, really old. Like, these aren't like things that are a couple of hundred years old. I mean, Notre Dame takes so long that the style of the architecture changes over time. So like, I had this idea that she played with and was able to really make her own, of this idea that she's ancient. When you talk about a human being being 300 years old, that's not just old. That is past the idea of how old people can be. So then it starts to move into a mystical space, a space of grandeur that you can't actually hold in your head. But if you sort of apply this idea that there's not a lot of effort to wow people when you walk into Sacré-Cœur, or you walk into, if you walk into Independence Hall even, which I would sort of describe as old and not ancient. Yeah. But it still holds, it still grabs you, it still holds you.
Its history and its value is still there.
Yeah, so I wanted her to play with that and find the way to sort of like make that a thing that she could bring into the room. And a lot of that was in the effort. Like, she didn't take a lot of effort to do things. A wave of a hand causes a ripple through the room that everybody is sort of responding to in this way that feels like a hurricane has just moved through. When she steps in, one of my favorite moments of the whole production is when they step into the water and that sound, that Dan Eisen made, and the light cue that sort of, doesn't
like
even blink up, but it just sort of
settling itself in.
But that's her. Like, she's making that happen. She can move the earth with her feet. So I'm glad you felt that, because that's the desired effect.
So I always ask about the introductions, because I was thinking of how many of the decades pieces I've experienced of August Wilson, and I think it's about 4. But what was your first introduction to Gem of the Ocean?
Well, when it was, there was a lot of pomp and circumstance when people found out that there was a new one, and I think that play and its subsequent productions preceded us finding out that he was ill.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like hearing about it and going, "Oh, it's the first one. I'm sure that's going to be fascinating." And I don't think I actually read it. No, I pretty much went out and bought it the second it was available to be purchased, and I didn't see it. I've actually, my first time seeing it is working on this production. And I remember reading it and feeling like it was too much for me to hold. Like I was like, I don't know that I understand this. I don't know that I get what it is. And then when Terry mentioned it in sort of, beginning the conversation of me directing it for the Arden, I read it again as an older person. And it suddenly was like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. And I'm not as afraid of. I think it frightened me. I think that's what I was responding to when I read it. Maybe when I was in grad school, maybe right after grad school. And I remember seeing these pictures from the production with Felicia Rashad and just feeling like, that looks frightening. Awesome in the original sense of the word awesome.
Isn't it interesting how it's like the second to last written, but even at that time, we're still not ready. We're still not ready for it. And I wonder if there were interviews with him where he was asked, why wait till now to, or was this an idea you just kept going back to, because if you're going to talk about all the decades, we thought it would start in order, but it didn't.
I mean, he's never written them in order. I mean, Jitney is the first play.
Jitney started, and that takes place in the 70s.
Yeah, and then I think Ma Rainey is next, and they've never been in order. So I'm not surprised by that. I think the genius of writing the first and the last, is that he was able to make those two pieces feel like they were sending a sort of electrical line through all the other plays. And Esther shows up in I think 4 of the other plays. Like they mention Esther. 1839 Wiley Avenue is mentioned in other plays. So he was able to sort of go and find the things that he needed to tether her because he's writing her last. Interesting thing about Gem of the Ocean into Radio Gulf, in Gem of the Ocean you have Caesar Wilkes and you have Citizen Barlow, sort of on these polar opposites of how the world works and what the world should look like, specifically for black people. When you get to Radio Gulf, there's a Wilkes and there's a Barlow. So like, well they lived, they had kids who had grandkids, and that level of world building, it's like, Marvel Universe world building, where it's like that's really elegant. Those are really elegant and specific sort of lines that when you read the work in its totality and order, you recognize that the work that he started in Gem of the Ocean comes to a head in a way in Radio Gulf with these two characters who are descendants through all of this, through this century down to Radio Gulf, which I think is just a magnificent achievement in writing for the theater.
Yeah,
I mean, no one else is able to do that. I mean,
There's a moment in the piece where I'm in a sense lost in the history of the piece itself, and it wasn't until I walked away and I had to write it down. I was like, we are carrying the weight of our ancestors, and it's like, because we just we hear and sort of dismiss that she's nearly 300 years old.
Mm-hmm. People laugh at it in our production. They're like,
yeah.
That's funny.
But when you think about it, it's like, wow, history, legacy, wisdom, you know, knowing where you've come from to know where you're going. Mm-hmm. And all of that comes to mind when you think about that. And, you know, and then how the play ends with this carrying on of tradition sort of taking the mantle, so to speak, to continue that journey forward. Also, while not necessarily erasing what brought Barlow there to begin with, but sort of using that to fuel and inform what Barlow does moving forward. And it's just like, wow. I mean, sitting in my side of the theater, everyone was just kind of like, whew, wow. Oh, like just a lot of comments like that. So I'm hoping, and I guess we all just kind of came to those same conclusions towards the end as we're looking at this. Because even when I do focus on these pieces, especially when it deals with a family sort of dynamic like this, I'm thinking slice of life at first. This is one moment. This is one person that Aunt Esther helps. And just imagine all the other people who have been so moved by Aunt Esther's wisdom, by her hospitality. And then we're looking at these sort of elements with Eli and Black Mary and Solly. It's like, yeah, you're just like, how do you even write so? Of course, it took so long to put this together. How do you even begin to write something with this? There's so many layers. Like, I can't even think about it. You know, someone always looks at something like, this is really great. How do we turn it into a movie? How do we package it and make it something else? And it's like, I don't know if you can, but I mean,
you can make anything to a movie. I think that there's something that is lost with a play like this.
Yeah.
That's different from, say, Fences, or Piano Lesson, both of which have been made into films.
Yeah.
That, although I think there's something lost with Fences, because I think they all are more. And this is something that we worked really hard to build and create in this production. They're all more magical than they're typically done. They all are more. I mean, Seven Guitars is a memory play, for God's sakes. It's in the same vein as like Glass Menagerie, where it's like, what's reliable, what's not, you know, and our relationship to time and memory, which is this mystical thing that we sort of like take for granted, but it's actually quite a potent human skill is the wrong word, but like evolutionary development in a way. You know, in Fences, Troy is battling death the whole play and trying to build a fence to keep death out. Yeah. Like, I think people don't want to drop into that, or they don't understand that, or they're afraid audiences won't respond to that. And I'm sure there are people who don't see the things that we're doing in this production that are intentionally trying to tease out the mysticism and the magic of the world. But I think they all have that, some to greater degrees than other. The early plays like Jem and Joe Turner, it's the clearest and the most sort of direct, but it's the thing that I think is the most astonishing, the thing that keeps me coming back as a reader, as a viewer, occasionally as a performer. I'm at that age now where it's like there's not really a part for me in these plays. I'm a little too old for like Jeremy and what's his son in Fences, Corey. Yeah. But I'm like not quite old enough for Harold Loomis and like Levy and folks like that. So yeah.
I was just talking to another actor the other day about you know, is there a piece that you've read, you've experienced, but you're not ready for? but you've read it and you've experienced it so much that you will be. And by the time you get there, it's like, we don't even need rehearsal. Just kind of get to, because I definitely do that with movies, and I've done it since I was younger. Like, I would get a VHS and I would play that VHS all month until I could quote, pretty much everything in it. And now I can sort of walk away from it because it has ingrained itself in the fabric of me. You know? However it matters to me is now officially there. Yeah. So I can move on and experience something else. It's not that I'm not experiencing other things at the time, but I mean, to think about so many of these roles, because we're always talking about how there's just not a lot of work out there. There's not a lot written, even though that's not true. It's
it's written. It's just something done. Yes.
Yeah. So you're just like, there's a handful that you are aware of that an audience will come see. But there's, so the options are limited when you are looking at the canon as a whole. And it's unfortunate, but it is just the way it is. So you are just, I wonder if the African-American men in theater are just have a list of characters they're waiting to play. It's like, it's not even fair for me to try to play this in a high school piece. I don't even know why you're producing it with us. But soon, one day.
Oh, yeah.
When I let my hair grow out, when I get a little gray in, it'll be natural.
I'm sure. I certainly have a list of roles that I'm like, maybe one day.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to other black actors that they have that same feeling, and a lot of them do come from this particular body of work because it's just so astonishing, like what you get to do as an actor. It's just like, I feel like there are a few other writers now that are writing in that way.
Yeah.
And are striving towards that. And some achieving it in some ways and some not. He is absolutely, I mean, I think of myself when I'm writing, I can't help but think about August Wilson. The first play that I read of my own choice, like I read The Crucible in high school, which I love. I love The Crucible, and I read Julius Caesar, and the first play that I saw on a shelf, and I picked it up and I opened it and I was like, I'm going to read this, with 7 guitars. And it's weird, like my like gateway plays are always the ones that don't follow the rules that we're supposed to follow, which shows in my approach to theater. It's like, I remember like finding Susan Laurie Park's early collection of plays when I was in college, I think. The one that has like Betting on the Dust Commander and the America play, the plays that people don't really do of hers, and reading that and being like, you can do this. Yeah. And 7 Guitars felt that way to me, that it started in the present and then went back in time. It was like, whoa, I hadn't seen that. Yeah. I hadn't seen a play. Those plays existed, but I hadn't come in contact with them. And I certainly hadn't come in contact with the black writer that was doing that. It's like Lorraine Hansberry in A Raisin in the Sun. Like, if you're lucky and you're, a black actor of a certain age, you get to play Ruth, you get to play Mama, you get to play Walter Lee, you get to play Beneatha. If you're lucky in your career and they swing back around at the right time, you get to do those things. And
unless you're Kayla Moses Baxter.
Well, then
you can play most of these roles.
That's true. You can play pretty much any age you want. But yeah, like that those great parts that are just like undeniable and sort of define even my generation's thinking about what a play should be and what great, not even just a black play, but just what a play. I think A Raisin in the Sun is a perfect play. It's perfect, and I don't believe in perfection. But what it does in terms of that moment in time and what everybody else was doing with a play at that time, it's perfect. And people don't say that. I'm going to say that on here, and people are going to like, meow, what about, but whatever, yeah, I'm off on a tangent now.
I wanted to talk about Caesar, because Caesar's character is part of a current conversation. When you think about Black Lives Matter, you think about law enforcement, and there's this conversation about, like, how can a person of color even be a part of law enforcement when law enforcement has this history of imbalance when it comes to people of color. And there's a moment where Caesar explains his position, and until he stops talking, you're there with him, and you're like, struggle is real, Caesar, but I don't like you. I don't like you. And you're just like, this has to be tough for him too, because and sort of like in the house, they're saying in this house, in this space, this is a sanctuary, and you keep the law out there, you keep the peace out there, but you know better in here almost. And it's and when you hear that, you're just like, I wonder how many, I had a conversation with another artist who moved to a predominantly African American neighborhood in the city, and he had mentioned that there was like an altercation, and his first thought was to call the police. But then when he went to a neighborhood meeting, they were like, what possessed you to call the police? It was like, don't you know anything about, like, it was sort of like, he didn't have the history of this neighborhood to even understand, like, oh, no, that's not how we handle things here, And it was, so it was kind of interesting. So when I thought about Caesar, I was just like, I mean, we know there are just good people everywhere, but we're getting a lot of references to the injustices that seem to be systemic, and they're not just individuals. It's almost like it's written. And if we could find that document, we could say, see, it's been here, it's on the books. Like, we know that there are laws in Pennsylvania on the books where, like, you and me are committing a felony, and it's like, why are they still in the books if you're not looking for your opportunity to enforce them? And if you think or believe they're not necessary, you sort of get this opportunity to overlook them when you see fit. But it doesn't seem like anyone sees fit.
I mean, Caesar's tricky, because Caesar, I think, in addition to the conversation about law enforcement, because that was the thing that was the most striking to me when I reread it. I was just like, well, this is timely.
Yeah.
Like, this is suddenly, like, absolutely timely. And, like, I mean, the systemic problem of over-policing of black communities, of the killing of unarmed black people, the mysterious death of black people in police custody, that is not new. It's just sort of something that we're, or I shouldn't say we, but like the larger culture is sort of like going, that's happening. And not even like, oh my God, that's happening, how do we end it? But literally just like, what a curiosity. But the other part of what Caesar, that scares me about Caesar, and the reason why he is at once incredibly charming in our production, but also terribly frightening, is that Caesar has made up in his mind that proximity to whiteness, in all of the ways in which one can do that, is not only his salvation, but it's the salvation of black people, which I would say was the prevalent racial thinking of that era. Like, there, the folks who were writing about race at that time, which are few and far between, that's kind of what they think. It's like, you can make black people white. Like, there were some people who thought you could make black people literally turn white if they sort of behaved in a certain set of ways. And so when he walks through the door of this house where they're like, we don't do that here. Like Esther is, the personification of hanging on to the traditions and the culture of our ancestors. He's at odds with that. Like, he's really, like, one of the things that I brought to the room, I don't know if you know this book / TV show, American Gods.
Yes.
This battle between the old gods and the new gods. And if we have, in this play, we have Caesar, who's representative of, like, capitalistic, paternalistic, meritocracy, industry he has this line, industry makes the country run. This idea that is the thing that's going to save us. And then on the other side of that, you have the old gods, which is just like representative through Esther and on some level Eli and Sally, and in between you have Black Mary and Citizen who are trying to figure out where they fit in that on that spectrum. But I kept wondering why he takes up so much space in the middle of this play. Like, he comes in and he dominates the play for about 20 minutes. Yeah. 20 minutes of this play is him talking about all of this stuff. And I kept going, why is August letting him speak that long? And I think the thing we have to do is we have to establish that the outside world is strikingly different from this house and the project of this house. And he is representative of, I feel, a lot of the things that have sort of caused us pain and harm in the last century. This idea that blackness is something that needs to be fixed or augmented or engaged with in this way, as opposed to it just is, all of the things that come with that, and it's and how it exists in this country is specific to the history that is attached to the making of both whiteness and blackness. Because whiteness is equally sort of unexamined. I should say blackness is quite examined and whiteness is relatively unexamined in our culture. Yeah. So, like, the thing that's so scary about Citizen to me is that I know that there are people in the audience that are like, yep, he's right. And that's terrifying to me. Black people who feel that way, white people who feel that way. And he was stealing. It's like, what does ownership mean when you're descendant of people who were owned on land that's stolen? Like, what does ownership mean then? When we talk about stealing, he's fascinating to me because I feel like he is still with us.
There was just so much to unpack here that I couldn't put it all in one interview. I mean, you have jobs, you have places to go, and you can't sit here forever. So, head on over to Rep Radio for part 2 of my interview with James Ijames, director of Gem of the Ocean at Arden Theatre Company. That's repradio.org, and subscribe to stay tuned. Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com and click Get Involved at the top. While you're there, help keep us running and click Contribute to find out how. Connect with us on social media, on Facebook and Twitter at Broad Street Review. Thank you for helping to keep the conversation going.